Ladies and gentlemen, not every internal storm deserves outside validation. Growth often happens in silence. Some struggles are not meant to be shared, not because of shame, but because of sanctity. There's a sacredness to the battles we fight alone, the kind that shape us in ways no one else can truly understand. When a woman chooses silence over exposure, it's not secrecy. It's strength disguised in restraint. Private battles are like underground roots. They stabilize the tree, but are never meant to be seen above the soil. In a relationship, vulnerability is often misinterpreted as full transparency, but real connection doesn't mean sharing everything. It means knowing what to protect so love doesn't become burdened by things it cannot carry. Some experiences are too raw, too unfinished to be handed over to someone else, no matter how close they are. They belong to the individual until they are fully processed, understood, and ready to become part of a shared journey. There's a danger in thinking that love is measured by how open we are. Sometimes, the more we open, the more we bleed, and the less room we leave for healing. The relationship begins to orbit around the pain instead of mutual presence. That's not intimacy, that's emotional outsourcing, and it risks turning a partnership into a therapy room where only one person holds the weight. It takes wisdom to know the difference between connection and codependence. Private battles build that wisdom. They're the places where we confront our own patterns, where we learn to sit with discomfort without projecting it outward. They teach us emotional resilience, a kind of quiet power that doesn't need witnesses to validate its worth. In those moments of solitude, we grow the most, not for anyone else, but for ourselves. When a woman keeps something to herself, she's not hiding. She's honoring her process. She's making sure that her partner is receiving the best version of her, not the most unfiltered one. Because not every cry needs to echo in another person's ears. Some tears are meant to water the soil of self-awareness. And when they do, they produce fruits that benefit the relationship far more than the chaos of oversharing. Men often want to solve what they hear. It's instinctual. So when a woman exposes an unhealed wound too early, it invites problem solving where listening was never the point. This mismatch can create tension instead of support. By keeping certain things private, she allows the relationship to breathe, untainted by misinterpretation or misdirected efforts to fix something that isn't theirs to fix. The modern world has confused openness. Social media praises radical transparency, but it rarely shows the cost. When everything becomes a performance, even pain, it loses its depth. A relationship isn't a stage, and your partner isn't the audience for every emotion you feel. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is face your chaos alone so your peace becomes a gift, not a project. In the relationship, boundaries and communication are not barriers to love, they're containers for it. When a woman chooses to keep her internal battles sacred, she creates space for true partnership instead of enmeshment. That's when both people can show up whole, rather than incomplete versions trying to fill each other's cracks with words and wounds. Privacy becomes the vessel that protects the relationship from becoming emotionally flooded. Silence, when intentional, becomes a form of emotional maturity. It's not withdrawal, it's not distance. It's a form of self-respect and respect for the relationship. Because once you know who you are within your own struggle, you bring clarity instead of confusion to the dynamic. You bring insight instead of intensity. And that changes everything. Private battles also prepare you to show up as your best self, not your broken one. They are where strength is forged. When you invite someone into your world prematurely, they may not know how to hold it. And when they react poorly, it reinforces the false idea that you're too much, too emotional, or too complicated. But that's not truth. It's mistimed vulnerability creating distorted perception. Real love flourishes when each person does their inner work independently and brings their lessons back to the relationship as wisdom, not wounds. There is something deeply attractive about a woman who knows how to hold her storms with grace and reveal them only when they've passed. Her strength becomes magnetic, not loud, but quietly undeniable. Her peace becomes protection, not just for herself, but for the bond she's building. When a woman keeps her private battles private, she isn't distancing herself from her partner. She's anchoring herself in self-awareness. And from that grounded place, she can give more, love deeper, and connect with intention, not from a place of emotional overflow. The relationship doesn't suffer from what's withheld. It thrives on what's filtered through clarity and care. Emotional intimacy is sacred, but emotional dumping creates imbalance. There's a line between emotional intimacy and emotional dependency, and it begins with understanding that your partner isn't your therapist. A relationship thrives on connection, not clinical breakdowns of every emotion, every insecurity, and every internal dialogue. While sharing is important, unloading constantly can quietly shift the relationship dynamic from romantic partnership to emotional caretaking, which neither person truly desires. When a woman turns her partner into a constant emotional dumping ground, it's not vulnerability, it's displacement. The belief that love equals absorbing each other's pain can wear down even the strongest connection. Emotional support should be a part of the relationship, not the entire foundation. Otherwise, love becomes burden and affection turns into fatigue. Your partner didn't sign up to diagnose your past traumas or solve your childhood wounds. They came to walk alongside you, not to carry your whole emotional history. When the expectation becomes therapeutic, the energy of the relationship shifts from shared joy to silent obligation. It's not because they don't care. It's because they're human, and humans have limits. Therapy exists for a reason. It's a space designed for the depth, the unraveling, the processing. Relationships, on the other hand, are designed for balance. When you confuse the two, you begin to blur the healthy boundary between care and codependency. Your partner may listen, but they can't heal you. Healing is a solo commitment that enhances the togetherness, not replaces the need for inner work. There's a difference between saying I'm going through something and reliving every emotional wave with your partner as if they are responsible for your regulation. When that happens repeatedly, the dynamic becomes tilted. One person becomes the fixer, the other becomes the emotionally ungrounded narrator. And that imbalance quietly chips away at attraction, respect, and mutual safety. Love isn't built on constant venting. It's built on mutual regulation, on knowing when to hold space and when to go inward. If you don't give yourself the space to sort through your emotions privately, you risk placing emotions into someone else's hands, hoping they'll organize them for you. That's a weight love was never meant to carry. Your growth is your responsibility. When a woman honors that truth, she empowers her partner to be what he was meant to be, a partner, not a therapist. It's in that space that both individuals can show up with presence, not pressure, with curiosity, not clinical strategy, with heart, not heaviness. A partner's role is to support your healing, not to be your healing. When your partner starts to feel more like your emotional coach than your romantic counterpart, the relationship changes. The ease disappears. The conversations shift from joyful to draining. The space that once held passion becomes a counseling room filled with silent expectations and misunderstood needs. What was once connection begins to feel like caretaking. Sharing selectively isn't secrecy, it's stewardship. You're stewarding your emotions, managing your inner world so it doesn't overflow and drown the relationship. That's maturity. It allows room for laughter, attraction, and playfulness to exist alongside empathy and understanding. Emotional safety isn't about constant access. It's about knowing when to share and when to self-contain. The best relationships aren't built on one person being the therapist and the other the client. They're built on two individuals doing their own work and bringing the fruits of that effort back to the connection. When each person honors their emotional responsibility, the relationship doesn't drown in feelings, it flourishes in presence, in clarity, and in peace. Insecurities are not flaws to be fixed by someone else. They are internal signals calling for your own attention. When a woman enters a relationship hoping her partner will erase her self-doubt, she unconsciously hands over the power to validate her worth. But no amount of reassurance can permanently quiet a voice that only she was meant to calm. Healing insecurities is an inside job, not a relationship requirement. Expecting a partner to constantly soothe your fears creates a dynamic that's more about emotional rescue than romantic connection. It turns love into a response system instead of a shared experience. Insecurities are natural, but when they aren't owned and addressed individually, they can start shaping every conversation, every assumption, every moment of silence, turning intimacy into tension. When a woman relies on her partner to validate her constantly, she builds emotional dependency, not security. Even when the validation comes, it doesn't stick because the root wound remains unaddressed. It's like pouring water into a cracked glass. No matter how much you fill it, it will always feel empty until you seal what's broken. That sealing has to come from within. There is nothing more exhausting than being expected to prove your love against someone else's fears every single day. It wears both people down. The partner begins to feel like they're walking on emotional eggshells, unsure of how their words or actions might trigger another spiral of doubt. Over time, this creates distance, not closeness. Healing your insecurities doesn't mean pretending you're unaffected or hiding your soft spots. It means owning them without expecting someone else to carry them. When you say, "This is my work to do," you take back power. You become the source of your own peace. And that inner stability is what allows a relationship to grow in freedom, not fear. When your sense of self is tied to how your partner behaves, you become reactive instead of grounded. A delay in a text becomes rejection. A distracted moment becomes disinterest. These are not reflections of reality, they're echoes of old wounds being projected forward. And unless you pause to untangle the source, you end up fighting battles your partner can't see and didn't create. There is power in learning to self-soothe. It's not about being cold or distant. It's about not needing constant confirmation to feel whole. When you give yourself that internal safety, your energy shifts. You stop needing your partner to prove their love in every moment, and you start experiencing the relationship with more clarity, more joy, more presence. Insecurities, when left unhealed, often masquerade as control. You begin to micromanage, to question, to interpret harmless things through the lens of fear. And in doing so, you limit the very freedom that love needs to breathe. You don't trust, not because they are untrustworthy, but because your own foundation is still shaky. There is a quiet confidence in a woman who says, "I felt that insecurity rise, but I knew it wasn't about you, so I held it, examined it, and didn't let it bleed into us." That kind of emotional self-awareness is magnetic. It creates a space where both people can be human without being held hostage by each other's unhealed places. Partners can support you, but they cannot save you from the voice in your own head. That voice is yours to challenge, to reframe, to calm. And when you do, your connection becomes richer. Not because the fear is gone, but because the fear no longer runs the show. You lead with self-trust instead of emotional panic. It's okay to share your insecurities, but share them as insights, not obligations. Say, "This is something I'm working through," not "you need to fix this for me." That one shift in language, in mindset, changes everything. It moves the relationship from wait to witness, from pressure to partnership, from fear to freedom. The more a woman owns her healing, the more empowered she becomes. And from that place, love isn't about being completed, it's about being met. Two whole people, two independent journeys, meeting not to fix, but to grow, to witness, to support, and to build something that no longer depends on reassurance, but thrives on mutual self-awareness and trust. Every person enters a relationship with a history, but not every history needs to walk into the present. The weight of past relationships, betrayals, disappointments, patterns, can easily become a shadow over something new and promising. When a woman carries that weight forward, it becomes difficult to distinguish the current connection from the wounds of the past. Love begins to feel like a test instead of a chance. Trust doesn't get built when every action is filtered through old pain. A simple silence is mistaken for withdrawal. A delayed reply feels like deception. A difference of opinion sounds like abandonment. The new partner becomes a stand-in for someone who isn't even there, expected to do better than a ghost they never met. This is how the past rewrites the present. Unhealed hurt tends to speak louder than intention. Without realizing it, a woman may begin to expect the worst, not because her current partner is doing something wrong, but because her nervous system is still wired to anticipate harm. This emotional residue distorts perception, causing problems that aren't actually rooted in the current reality. When a partner feels they're constantly paying the price for someone else's mistakes, resentment builds. No matter how patient or kind they are, the imbalance becomes too heavy to carry. Love becomes performance-based, not trust-based. It shifts from connection to correction, where they are always trying to prove they are not the past. That isn't fair, and over time, it isn't sustainable. It takes strength to admit that someone who hurt you no longer deserves to dictate how you receive love. That emotional authority has to be reclaimed. Until it is, you're not fully present. You're half in, half back, always bracing, always scanning for a pattern that might never come again. And in that state, real intimacy becomes impossible. There's a quiet shift that happens when a woman says, "He is not them, and I won't make him pay for their choices." That choice doesn't erase pain, it transforms it. It stops recycling suffering into new stories. It allows the current partner to be seen for who they are, not what someone else failed to be. And in that seeing, love begins to breathe. You cannot build a future by living in emotional debt. Every doubt that isn't rooted in the present needs to be questioned. Every expectation born from a previous betrayal must be examined. Because if you don't, you end up recreating the very conditions you're trying to avoid. Fear becomes prophecy, and the past repeats itself in disguise. Letting go of past relationships doesn't mean forgetting them. It means releasing their grip on how you interpret love now. It means giving the new relationship a real chance to define itself, not as redemption, not as repair, but as something wholly its own, free of comparison, free of punishment, and full of possibility. Dreams are fragile in their early stages, not because they are weak, but because they are still forming. Like seeds in soil, they need darkness, warmth, and protection before they are exposed to the light. When a woman has a vision, a calling, or a personal goal, sharing it too early, especially in a relationship, can expose it to misunderstanding, judgment, or even casual dismissal that slows her momentum. There's a sacredness in holding something for yourself before offering it to others. Not every dream is ready to be spoken, especially when it's still being shaped by self-belief. The temptation to share it all with a partner is natural, especially in the glow of connection, but timing matters. Premature exposure can introduce doubt where there was once clarity. A dream in its beginning is not yet armor. It's skin. It's vulnerable to outside energy, even from people who love us. Sometimes a partner's skepticism isn't cruelty, it's their own fear projected onto your future. And if you aren't grounded in your vision yet, even well-meaning concern can sound like criticism. When a woman learns to protect her dreams before they're fully grown, she isn't being secretive, she's being wise. She knows that certain desires must be nurtured in solitude until they can stand on their own. This doesn't mean shutting a partner out. It means building a foundation before asking anyone else to step on it. Not every dream needs validation. In fact, the most meaningful ones rarely do. They come from a place so personal, so connected to identity, that asking for approval diminishes their power. When you wait until you're rooted in it, until your belief is stronger than your doubt, that's when you can speak it without needing permission. A relationship should be a space of support, but not a permission slip for your aspirations. Sharing your dreams too soon can unintentionally shift the dynamic. Your partner may respond from their own limitations, and suddenly you're questioning yourself, wondering if what felt so real was just fantasy. Timing is everything. When you wait, you give yourself time to explore your dream fully. What it means, why it matters, what it will take. That quiet work, done before it's spoken, builds the conviction you'll need later when others question, misunderstand, or challenge you. Your preparation becomes your protection. When you hold a dream close, it teaches you patience and self-trust. You learn how to listen inward rather than constantly seeking outward agreement. That practice becomes a foundation for confidence, not arrogance, but a quiet, unshakable belief in where you're going, even if no one else sees the map yet. A partner doesn't have to understand your dream to respect it, but you have to understand it enough yourself to not crumble if they don't. That strength only comes when you've taken the time to sit with your vision, to explore it, to give it space without needing immediate applause or affirmation. There's a difference between isolation and intentional incubation. One is rooted in fear, the other in care. Holding back your dream until it's ready isn't about keeping secrets. It's about letting something grow in peace. And when it's ready, when it has shape and direction, then sharing becomes an invitation, not a request for approval. When a woman finally shares a dream that she's taken time to build privately, the energy around it is different. It's not, what do you think? It's, this is what I'm doing. That kind of clarity shifts the response. It invites support, not doubt. It commands respect, not negotiation. Dreams, like relationships, deserve intentional timing. Both can be beautiful, both can be fragile, and both require care in how they're introduced and nurtured. When a woman chooses to protect her dream until it's strong enough to stand on its own, she's not hiding, she's honoring what she's building and giving it the best chance to thrive. There's a quiet power in restraint, especially in relationships, where words often feel like the only currency for connection. But not every thought, opinion, or reaction needs to be spoken. Silence, when used with intention, isn't suppression, it's discernment. It's the ability to recognize that just because something crosses your mind doesn't mean it deserves a place in the room. In emotional moments, the pressure to express everything often feels like the path to intimacy, but too much openness can overwhelm the space between two people. Constant commentary, emotional venting, or unchecked reactions start to feel like noise rather than communication. And in the noise, the relationship begins to lose its clarity. There's a discipline in pausing before speaking, in asking yourself, what am I hoping to create by saying this? If the answer is relief for yourself at the cost of your partner's peace, then maybe it's a thought best processed internally. Relationships aren't therapy rooms. They're partnerships that require emotional responsibility. Not every insecurity needs a voice, especially when it's still raw and unexamined. When you give your thoughts time to settle, what felt urgent often dissolves into insight. The story you wanted to tell at 9 a.m. might look completely different by noon. Speaking less doesn't mean you feel less. It means you're learning to feel with intention. A woman who holds her thoughts with care isn't hiding, she's stewarding the energy of the relationship. She knows that some reactions are hers to manage, not her partner's to absorb. She recognizes that unfiltered honesty, when repeated too often, can become a form of emotional carelessness disguised as transparency. There's a way to share without spilling, to speak without overwhelming, to express without exploding. It starts with listening to yourself first, sorting through the emotion, the ego, the impulse, and asking, what part of this is actually mine to speak? That moment of inner check-in creates space for connection instead of collision. When words are used sparingly, they begin to carry more weight. A calm truth spoken with intention lands deeper than a flood of reactive commentary. Silence, in the right moments, isn't distance, it's respect. It gives both people the opportunity to reflect, to reset, to return to the conversation with more clarity. Sometimes what you want to say is just a reflection of your own discomfort. You want to say it to offload, not to understand. But growth comes from sitting with those uncomfortable thoughts until they either shape into wisdom or fade into irrelevance. The pause between thought and speech is where emotional intelligence lives. It's not about being inauthentic, it's about being strategic with your truth. Timing, tone, and intention all matter. A truth shared in peace has a very different impact than the same truth shared in frustration. And knowing when to wait, when to hold, when to filter is not manipulation, it's care. The strongest women aren't the loudest in the room or the ones who share every feeling in real time. They're the ones who choose their words like arrows, deliberate, clear, and meant to build, not break. They understand that thoughts are sacred, and not all of them need to be released to be honored. Family conflicts shape us in ways we often don't recognize until we're in a relationship of our own. The unresolved tensions, the old wounds, the patterns we grew up with, they all become part of our emotional language. But there's a boundary that must be honored. What began in your family is not your partner's burden to carry. When a woman brings her family conflicts into her relationship unchecked, she begins to blur the lines between history and the present. She may expect her partner to understand dynamics they've never lived through, to defend her in battles they didn't start, or to feel loyalty to a side they were never part of. The danger isn't just in sharing, it's in involving. When your partner becomes a sounding board for every family argument or an ally in ongoing family tension, the relationship shifts. What should be a safe space becomes a courtroom where judgments are made and sides are taken, eroding the intimacy you're meant to protect. A partner can support you, but they are not meant to be the solution to generational issues. When you bring family conflict into your connection, hoping they will fix, mediate, or absorb the weight, you unintentionally put them in an emotional triangle that distorts both relationships, the one you have with them and the one you have with your family. It's important to process, to reflect, to be witnessed, but that's different from transferring responsibility. Your partner didn't cause your sibling rivalry, your parents' criticism, or the silence you learned to live with. And while they can offer love and empathy, the healing still belongs to you. Sometimes, sharing too much detail about family conflict can create tension where it doesn't belong. Your partner starts to form opinions about people they've never truly met, based not on their experience but on your pain. This limits the relationship's emotional space and narrows how your partner sees the world you come from. There's a balance in honoring your story without making it someone else's responsibility. That balance begins with boundaries: emotional, verbal, and energetic. It's okay to say, I'm working through something, without turning your partner into a secondary participant in an unresolved family script. A partner wants to know you, not be consumed by your history. They want to understand what shaped you, not be shaped by it. When you give them that space, when you handle your family conflict without making it theirs, you're showing emotional maturity, not emotional distance. Some family wounds never fully heal, but that doesn't mean they need to infect every corner of your life. Your relationship should be a sanctuary, not an extension of chaos. And the more you take ownership of your healing, the more peace you create, not just for yourself, but for the connection you're building. There's power in being able to say, this is my past and I'm not going to let it define us. That statement alone can shift the emotional landscape of a relationship, because it means you've drawn a boundary, not out of avoidance, but out of respect for your partner, for your relationship, and for the version of yourself you're still becoming.